Hello fellow audiophiles, I am Wave Theory and I am back today with another headphone review, and that is the HiFiMan HE-R9, which is an exciting piece because this is one of HiFiMan's early forays into closed-back, yes, closed-back, dynamic driver headphones. So we will dive into this one today, and before we do, just please remember to like and subscribe and to do all of those things that you do to support YouTube channels. All right, on with the review. This was sent to me brand new, direct from HiFiMan. They have asked for nothing in return other than the link to a fair and honest review. They have made no attempt to influence my opinion one way or the other on this piece. I will also put a link where you can buy this down for Apos Audio because they are an affiliate sponsor of mine, so that will be an affiliate link. If you're interested in buying this, that would be another buying option, and I will get a couple bucks back if you choose to go that route. All right, so as I just mentioned, this is exciting because HiFiMan has not really done a whole lot of this in the past, and they now have a line of closed-back dynamic driver headphones, for which this is not quite the entry level. I believe the entry level for their foray into this is the R7X, which is sold as a collaboration with Drop. This comes in, and the pricing on this at the timing of this video is a little bit interesting. This normally lists for $599 US for the wired configuration, and $749 US for the wireless configuration, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But it is on sale now, at least the wired version is, and I just looked up the price on this, like literally just before I started shooting this video to confirm that it was still going on. The date that I filmed this and will likely post is Saturday, May 21st. Today is the 21st, I think. Yes, Saturday, May 21st, 2022. Okay, so the wired version of this is on sale for $369 US directly from HiFiMan's website, which I will put a link to down in the description. Apos has told me that they will price match that. So I would check with Apos too to see what their pricing is. I don't believe that they have actually dropped the price on the website, but if you email them, say, hey, you have a price match deal, which they advertise, and I bet they will match that price for the wired version. The wireless version, which again I will explain what that means in just a moment, is still $749 on the HiFiMan website, which is odd. Okay, more on that in a moment. Okay. So other than that, let's just talk about what this is. So I already mentioned closed-back dynamic driver. Okay, the cup shape here is a hand-me-down from the old Sony MDR R10, which I'm not going to remember the exact date in history on that, but somewhere back in the late 1980s, Sony launched their flagship closed-back headphone, the MDR R10, which was the first headphone, I believe, to use biocellulose drivers in it. It was a dynamic driver and all of that, and that was pretty revolutionary. But it had a wooden ear cup that had this shape to it. My understanding is that the trademark on that Sony design lapsed not long ago, and HiFiMan swooped in and just started adopting this design for closed-back headphone ear cups, which I'm sure they did for a reason. I'm sure it's a good design sonically, even though it looks very wonky. Okay, it has this. Now, the higher-end models in HiFiMan's line with the cups of this shape, which are the two versions of the HE-R10. The really top of the line one has planar magnetic drivers in it and sells for $5,500 US, I think, something like that. And then they have about $1,200 usually, which is also on sale right now. It's the R10D, which is a dynamic driver. And I think, at least in pictures, it looks like it has a wood cup on it with this shape. This is plastic. Okay, it's a pretty thin, cheap feeling plastic, honestly, and it has this sparkly red finish to it. So not only does the cup have this weird looking shape, it's got this eye-catching color, and like in the right light, I don't know if this will show up very well, I will try to get a picture of it for my thumbnail, but it sparkles. It has that kind of metallic-y finish to it, so it has sparkles on it. And it looks a little bit silly on the head, I think, right? I mean, the color and the shape, definitely attention getting, they stick way out there. And that sort of thing. I have a friend who saw these and she described them as being traffic cones. Can't say she's entirely wrong. Okay. Anyway, looks, aesthetics, always in the eye of the beholder. When they're on my head, I don't really care so much what they look like when I'm on my own and all of that. I had considered taking these out for like walking the dog and such, and then I was like, maybe not. Okay, that's just me. All right. But anyway, that's what they look like on the head and so forth. Okay. Now, for a $600 list price, they feel kind of cheaply built, honestly. Like, they've got the plastic on the ear cups here. We have this newer style headband, which, I mean, love it or hate it, it works okay when the headphone is light in terms of comfort. Heavier headphones like the HE-6 SEV2 that has this headband style on it, like, you get hot spotting and discomfort on the top of the head over time. I really didn't notice that so much with these, but these are nice and light. How light? On the back of the box, they are specified to have a mass of 328 grams, which equates to 11.5 ounces in the English system. So that's on the lighter side for sure. The pads here are nice and soft and cushy. They are a hybrid with, I think, a faux leather on the outside and then some sort of fabric material, suede, velour, something like that here on the inside. The ear opening is big enough for most ears. I think some people will experience a little bit of pressure on the bottom of the lobes and all that. I think for the most part it fits my entire ear on the inside. And they're just deep enough that my ears never touched on the inside either, but some might, because they're not the deepest in there. All right, so keep that in mind for some, but they're nice and soft. Okay, they fit well around the head. Even with my glasses, I really didn't notice any sealing issues with or without glasses, that sort of thing. So they are reasonably comfortable. And even though they're kind of light and they feel cheaply built, like, there's really not a whole lot. Like, I haven't had any build quality complaints. Like, I don't hear any creaking in this. Like, this motion feels solid. There's a little bit of cup swivel here, just enough to fit most heads. You know, this motion here, like, that's pretty solidly for the head size adjustment. Like, that feels pretty solid and all of that. It's lighter and just a little bit chintzier feeling than you would expect. But I also, like, I wore these outside in my yard while doing some yard work, and I even using the Bluetooth dongle, which we'll get to in a moment, I took them up on the roof when I cleaned out my gutters. And, like, I would bang these into things, like, you know, flipping over a big bag of leaves or something to dump into the dumpster. And, like, I'd hit them on something because they'd stick out. But I don't really see any scratches or anything like that now. I mean, I have fingerprints on them because I've been handling them a lot now. But, like, scratches or nicks or anything, and I bumped these things pretty hard on, like, tree branches and stuff a time or two, and I don't really see any ill effects of that. So even though they feel light and chintzy, they have some durability to them, I think. There. Okay. That's the build of the headphone itself. The stock cable is pretty typical HiFiMan now. Like, basically their under $1,000 units are coming with this cable now, and I have complained about it before. I'm just going to say again, this is not the greatest cable. It injects a treble peak sonically, which on previous headphones that I've heard, like the Edition XS and what was the other one? Why am I drawing a blank? HE-400 SE. That treble peak was undesirable. The tuning on this one is different enough where some people might actually like that little treble increase that the cable gives. So not a universal condemnation on the cable for this headphone this time around. All right. Let's see. What else? Okay. Let me talk about this thing quickly. This is the Blue Mini R2R Bluetooth dongle that is compatible with the HE-R9, the HE-R10D at least, the Deva Pro, and I think there is an Ananda model that this is also compatible with out there. So what this is it's a specific Bluetooth DAC amp for those models of HiFiMan headphones that I just mentioned. It uses a specially built miniaturized R2R digital to analog conversion step in it. It also will amplify those headphones that I just talked about. And it has this TRRS 3.5 millimeter connector here on it, which is compatible with one side of this headphone. So the left cup here, I'll hold it this way so it is on the left. There's a little arrow. I don't know how well it will show up, but it says 3.5 millimeter TRRS. So you can connect this thing up on that side, turn it on, and what you have is the wireless version of this system here. And you see it, that the dongle fits on there pretty well. Okay, like so. All right, we have the power and connect button here. We have a USB-C port for charging. And you can also use this little module as a wired DAC amp. Plug it in USB to a computer. You can use it there too. Works as a wired connection that way if you wish. And then we have a microphone on it, so you can take calls. I did not test the call feature. I just listened to music, mostly using Bluetooth with this thing here. So the Blue Mini R2R dongle is an interesting piece that will get its own review at some point, because I also got one of these to use with the Deva Pro, which I was sent for review, and I hope to get to that soon. So tune in for more fully fleshed out thoughts on this thing itself. I think there are some things worth talking about on this, but I will mention how these two sound together here in this review. All right. That's a lot of stuff about what this thing is, how it's built, and all of that. Oh, one last thing on there. Like, we still have the HiFiMan dual 3.5 millimeter cup entry there. So in the wired version, like I showed you on the stock cable, we have the dual 3.5 millimeter plugs here on the headphone end. So, and they are flush mounted jacks on the cups there. So you can use any standard dual 3.5 millimeter headphone cable you want to drive these from a standard headphone amp, okay, in a wired connection. There's just some sort of internal switch mechanism going on here that switches from the TRRS connector to the dual 3.5 millimeter TS. I realize these are TRSs, but a TS will work just as well, okay, if you're going to do dual cup entry and use your own cable. Okay. All right, let's get to the sound. Took long enough, right? Let's talk about that. So, the tuning of these. I think HiFiMan was really going for a more mass market, mainstream kind of tuning on these. It is a bit of a break from like the HE-400 SE, the Edition XS, the Aria Stealth, the HE-1000 V2, like those are all tuned kind of this warm, slight V to them, but still fairly neutral-ish with a bit of warmth, great bass extension, that sort of thing, but still closer to neutral than they are not. These, they seem to go all in on, we're going to give them a bass shelf, so there's a lot of bass here. They did roll off the treble a little bit in comparison to their other models, but not as much as some other mass market cans do. And I think the mid-range is just slightly more forward than many of the other HiFiMan models that I have heard. So you get a warm, bassy, punchy sound here with vocals pushed just slightly forward. And then the treble is still nice and present, but it's not as aggressive or as forward as it is on other HiFiMan. So you're getting that warmer, slightly darker sound with a little bit more vocal presence and all that, which I think, again, to me, sounds like as I just said, they are going for a more mass market mainstream tuning. Okay, especially when there is a wireless option to compete with some of the other offerings that are out there, like the Sony XM or the Sony WH-1000 active noise cancelers, the new Apple, what's the name of them? But they're what? They're $450 or $550 ANCs out there. The name escapes me. But those new Apple headphones that are in that range. Okay, even some Beats, I would say, like just kind of trying to compete with that kind of tuning. And for the most part, I think it works. There is a lot of bass here, and there's a lot of physicality to that bass. It hits pretty hard, and there's a lot of rumble. There's still some pretty decent bass articulation, bass detail, like there's some detectable bass texture in there, which you don't always hear from those other models that I've talked about. And so forth. Now, there's not a ton of boom or bloat, but there is some. Okay, the bass shelf here does bleed into the mid bass, the upper mid bass, lower mid range a bit, where these can sound a bit boomy, or sometimes you hear the term chesty out there, and sometimes it's just a little bit bloated through there. Usually not bad. It happens most with very busy music that has a lot of different sounds all competing in that frequency range. And that's where you'll hear it get a little bit sloppy, a little bit boomy. All right, the mid-range, again, it's just a little bit forward. So for me, there was some shoutiness and some honkiness to it every now and then. Not to the point where I couldn't listen. Some headphones get to the point where there's just too much of that. It's overwhelming and I can't hear around it. That, not the case with these, but it was present more than any other HiFiMan that I've heard. Let's just go with that too, okay? And then we get into the treble, and like I said, it's rolled off a little bit. I think for long-term listening and less fatigue is the goal there, but it's still brighter than some of the more mainstream options out there. But there's still some fairly nice detail and some okay timbre up there in cymbal hits and that sort of thing. Okay. So then, like I said, a lot of physicality. That bass hits and it hard, it rumbles hard. You can feel these things vibrate on your head with some really hard-hitting, very bassy music. You know, you don't even have to turn it up all that loud to feel it. You'll notice it. Okay, whether or not you like that is very much a personal preference thing. All right, soundstage and imaging, separation, spatial presentation, that stuff is okay. Right? I wouldn't call it a strength of this headphone. It's definitely better, especially from a wired connection, than it is from many of those other mainstream models that I just mentioned. It's going to be noticeably better than those, especially from the wired connection. But it's not as holographic sounding as their open back offerings. Like the Edition XS, for example, at $500 USD, sounds more spatially holographic to me. These are closed back, so that's part of it. Okay, they don't sound as wide. They still sound fairly wide and big for a closed back headphone, but they're not going to compete with HiFiMan's other open backs in terms of, soundstage size. Many other open backs don't compete with HiFiMan's open backs in terms of soundstage size, but don't expect immense soundstage here. The imaging and the separation within can be pretty good. I think, like I mentioned, that mid-bass bloat, if you're playing music where you hear that bloat and that slight bit of congestion in the mid-bass, you'll start to hear the imaging and separation suffer a bit. But when that doesn't happen, when that bloat isn't there, you do get a reasonably holographic presentation for a closed back of this price, I think. Okay. Detail retrieval, I would put it pretty close to the Edition XS, which I realize is $100 cheaper, but is also open back and has a much bigger driver area and is planar and that sort of thing. Not quite as resolving as the Edition XS overall, but close. Okay, you still get a fair amount of detail. You get a little bit more texturing and nuance to the sound than you do from some other mass market mainstream tuned headphones. Okay. I will mention one more thing then in terms of like using the isolation. These cups are pretty thin, so they don't block a ton of sound. And so even though the pads are nice and soft and give you a pretty good seal, like you still get a fair amount of ambient noise going on. Like I can clearly hear my fingers snapping out here. I don't know if the microphone is picking up, but my desktop computer is running. I can still hear like some fan noise from it to my left and that sort of thing. I have listened to these around my family while we're all sitting in the same room, and I've asked, can you hear these? And they're like, yeah, we hear them a little bit. So they're not the most isolating. So they're not the greatest option if you're going to be using at a cubicle, but if you keep the volume lower, you could probably get away with it nonetheless. But if you're going to be using these on a loud riding lawnmower or something like that, they're not going to drown out that sound. Okay, they're not. All right. Quick comparisons then with some other headphones. Oh, maybe I didn't even mention this, but I need to. Really easy to drive. 32 ohm impedance, 100 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. So you can drive these off of just about anything. Okay, and in fact, they are sensitive enough that I sometimes heard the noise floor, particularly in high gain mode for a number of my amps, which I don't hear very often. So that's another thing to be aware of. Okay. I'm going to pull these out here. These are my Sony WH-1000 XM3 active noise canceling Bluetooth headphones. These were $300. Okay, when I bought them new. The XM4 is the latest model. Okay, I think there might be an XM5 soon. Did I see that somewhere? Don't quote me on that. I'm sure there will be one at some point. Anyway, Sony sells their top of the line ANCs for about $300. Using LDAC Bluetooth connection and my Samsung Galaxy S22 Plus smartphone, and comparing the Sony to this combo, the Blue Mini R2R dongle and the HE-R9, and mostly using the Spotify app, I could not really hear much difference in overall sound quality between the two. From a wired connection, these sound noticeably better than the Sonys do from the wireless connection, even from the wired connection here, because the wiring on these still goes through all the internal DSP and all of that stuff. Okay, but when you switch it to wireless mode, there was very little difference. Yes, these sounded a little bit wider soundstage. They were a little bit clearer and more coherent in their spatial presentation. There's just a little bit more detail retrieval, and they have a little bit more treble energy, a little bit more brightness than these. But in terms of bass presence and slam, these are pretty much even. In terms of vocal timbre and clarity, pretty much even, and all of that. So like, is not a big gap here. So I thought, well, maybe that's just because, and even though I was using the highest quality Spotify, quality for both streaming and download to test, I'm like, well, you know, LDAC is a decently all right Bluetooth codec. Let's switch over to Qobuz. So I switch over to Qobuz and do lossless streams from Qobuz and still use the LDAC Bluetooth connection for both of these. And basically the same difference there. These are just a little bit more detailed. The bass maybe got a little bit more under controlled and textured than it was on the Spotify lossy stream. But in general, the differences that I just described to you were still there at about the same level. Okay, so I think this is a limitation of Bluetooth tech right now. At $749 USD, this combo is not really, in my mind, worth the money over the latest and greatest, you know, Sony ANCs out there. for just wireless purposes. Using these primarily as wired and then picking this up as a simple bonus to be able to take them wireless when you want might make a little bit more sense, because again, from a wired connection, these are comfortably better than those ANC, the Sony ANCs, okay? But not from the wireless, okay? For $369 US for the wired version, the price right now, these are a no-brainer. They are very good, particularly if you like that mass market tuning. They sound really great for things like EDM, dubstep, and hip hop. Like, they hit hard. There's just like a lot of that. They sound pretty okay for metal and classic rock and that sort of thing. For classical music, jazz, and other more acoustic stuff, they don't have the greatest timbre, and they're not tuned to make those genres sound the best. Okay, so keep that in mind too. But at $369, excellent price here. The wired version at $600, I don't know if I'd call it unfair in price, but I would shop around and wait for sales and get and deal hunt at that point. And I hope that HiFiMan includes the wireless version in the sale that they are running right now, because flat out $750 for the two of these for the wireless connection, not worth it, okay, in my opinion. And I don't think that's necessarily because the R2R dongle is bad. I just think that there's a limitation of the wireless tech out there right now. And even if you use it wired and connect via USB, I think there are some other issues with that I will flesh out when I review the Blue Mini R2R dongle on its own to worry about. So that's my takeaway there. So yeah, we'll leave it there. At the current price for the wired version of $369, smash that buy button, okay? Pretty good headphone for that. $600 for the wired version is not terrible. I think more like $500 would be a little bit better, and all of that. Mainstream, bass-heavy tuning. The timbre is okay, but not great. Definitely a better performer for things like hip-hop, EDM, dubstep. Some metal can sound good here, some classic rock. I would not recommend this for more acoustic-oriented genres of music. Okay, that's my review of the HiFiMan HE-R9. I think it's a pretty solid effort for HiFiMan doing closed back and dynamic driver, which they don't do very often. Like, they didn't completely screw it up. Like, there's some definite strengths here, and I am encouraged and curious to see where they go next with their whole closed back and or dynamic driver line. All right, I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the HiFiMan HE-R9 headphone. Thanks for watching, and as always, enjoy the music.